Today we're going to be making some Fatayer, which is a personal favorite of mine. We're going to start with 4 1/3 cup of flour, 1 tablespoon of sea salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 packet of yeast. Give that a little whisking until everything is combined. Next we'll add half a cup of canola oil. You could also use melted ghee instead, but I just didn't have any. 3 cups of lukewarm water. Now we'll carefully give that a mix until all the liquids aren't sloshing everywhere. You don't have to use a stand mixer to beat the dough, but it really helps a lot. Beat that until there's no more raw flour remaining, then we'll cover and let it rise for an hour and a half. Now you may be noticing that my dough is looking a little too wet here, and you'd be right. I was originally using my grandmother's cookbook, but I missed a note and didn't use enough flour. That's okay though, it's an easy fix. We'll toss it back in the stand mixer, add more flour until it's not quite as tacky. This took me 21 tablespoons, but don't worry, the 4 1/3 cups of flour I mentioned earlier is the correct amount. So your dough should be just fine so long as you follow that quantity. Whip out your biggest cutting board, then cover that and your hands in flour. This will help prevent the dough from sticking. You'll also need to flour the board and your hands throughout this whole next step. Now we'll tuck the farthest edges of the dough underneath itself. We want to do this so we have a nice flat surface on the top. Once it's nice and smooth, form it into a log shape and start to cut off large handful size portions. Form those into balls the same way we did before, or just do it in your hands, and lay them on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. Now we'll let those rest for an additional 30 minutes. You'll want to let this rise again even if you use the correct amounts I mentioned before. During the first round of letting the dough rise, we'll prepare our meat filling. I used 2 pounds of Midamar's 93 7-gram beef, 1 small onion finely diced, about 1 tablespoon of sea salt, only use a half a tablespoon of salt if you're using iodized, 1 tablespoon of black pepper. Squeeze the juices out of a 28-ounce can of tomatoes and then add those tomato solids to the Fatayer mix. I also wouldn't recommend using our 80/20 ground beef for this. The extra fat can make the bread too soggy and it can cause the Fatayer to tear later when removing from the pan. Plus, ain't nobody like a soggy bread. Now that our dough is risen, we'll bust out the floured cutting board again. Lay out one of our dough balls, then we'll start to roll the dough out flat. Make sure to put flour on the rolling pin as well, that'll help the dough from sticking. Now we'll lay out an appropriate amount of meat mix for the dough ball that we have, and we'll bring in a small bowl of water to dip our little fingies in. Now we'll wrap that into a traditional triangle shape. If you want to make that a little bit easier, you can form the meat into the triangle and then wrap the dough around that and seal it that way. Lift the dough up around the meat and squish the dough together to make a nice little seam. Don't be too discouraged if you struggle with this part though. Practice makes perfect, and no matter how they look, they're going to taste delicious. We'll continue with that until you run out of meat or dough, whichever comes first. And don't worry if you have some extra dough, you can always pick up some of our pizza toppings and make a quick pizza out of those. We'll lay the Fatayer on a few aluminum foil-lined baking sheets that were sprayed with nonstick spray. Then we'll baste the tops of our Fatayer with olive oil. This will give us a nice light golden look. We'll bake those at 350 for 15 minutes or until the tops are golden brown, and that's it. We'll let them rest at room temperature for 5 to 10 minutes, and once you can hold them, you're ready to chow down. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week with a brand new halal recipe.